On the night of April 26, 1944, a German general left his headquarters in Heraklion, Crete, and vanished. No explosions, no gunfire, no alarms. Heinrich Kreiper was stopped at what appeared to be a routine checkpoint by men in German uniforms who were not German at all. What followed was not a battle, but a calculated act of humiliation, an operation designed to prove that Nazi authority could be breached at the very top. When German forces invaded Crete in May 1941, the operation was meant to be decisive. Instead, it became one of the costliest victories of the war. The airborne assault, Operation Mercury, saw German paratroopers suffer heavy losses during the opening days. Civilians joined Allied troops in resisting the landings. For Berlin, Crete was secured but never truly subdued. After the battle, Crete became a fortress island. Airfields at Malema, Heraklion and Rethymno allowed German aircraft to project power across the eastern Mediterranean. Supply routes to North Africa ran within reach. Strategically, the island mattered, but politically, it became a problem because resistance never stopped. From 1941 onward, local Cretan networks worked alongside British intelligence. Weapons were hidden and messengers crossed mountain paths at night. German patrols controlled the roads, but the interior remained hostile territory. Entire villages quietly supported sabotage and intelligence gathering. German commanders responded with harsh security measures, hoping fear would succeed where force had failed. The arrival of Friedrich Wilhelm Müller in August 1942 marked a brutal turning point. As commander of the 22nd Air Landing Infantry Division, Müller answered to Luftwaffe General Bruno Breuer, the island's overall commander. But it was Müller whose counterinsurgency tactics became infamous. Mass arrests, village burnings, and executions followed partisan attacks. The massacre at Vianos in September 1943, over 500 civilians killed, was ordered under his command. German records framed these actions as security operations. Post-war courts would view them differently. Müller's brutality hardened resistance rather than breaking it. In March 1944, Müller was reassigned and replaced as division commander by Heinrich Kreiper, a general major and decorated veteran of the Eastern Front. Kreiper was not considered lenient, but he was seen as more disciplined, more predictable. Crete's command structure was complex. German army units worked alongside Luftwaffe installations and naval coastal defenses. Intelligence services tracked resistance cells, while patrols guarded roads and supply depots. Yet the terrain undermined control. The White Mountains divided the island. Roads were limited. Radio communication was unreliable outside major towns. British planners understood this geography well. The Special Operations Executive had operated on Crete since 1941, maintaining contacts and safe houses. For London, the island was not just a military objective but a symbolic one. Crete had resisted once. It was still resisting. By early 1944, Allied strategy no longer required retaking the island. The front lines had moved west. Yet Crete remained useful for something else: morale. Demonstrating that German command could be penetrated, even mocked, served a broader purpose. What is clear is this: when Kreiper assumed command, he entered a landscape already primed for defiance. His authority existed on paper. On the ground, it was fragile, and British officers watching from the mountains knew it. The idea did not come from London. By 1943, British SOE officers embedded with the resistance had unusual autonomy. Communications with Cairo existed, but decisions were shaped locally by men who knew the terrain and the people. At the center was Major Patrick Lee Fermor, an SOE officer already legendary among Cretan fighters. Lee Fermor had lived on the island before the war. He spoke fluent Greek, understood local customs, and moved easily between villages. To the resistance, he was not a foreign agent but a familiar presence. German intelligence knew his name, even if they could not find him. Working alongside him was Captain William Stanley Moss, younger and more methodical. Moss was responsible for much of the planning. He studied patrol schedules, road layouts, and command routines. The operation required precision because there would be no second chance. Any mistake would trigger immediate reprisals. The target was Friedrich Müller. His reputation made him a symbolic prize. Removing him would send a clear message. But intelligence lagged behind events. By the time the team landed on Crete in early April 1944, Müller had already been replaced by Kreiper. Lee Fermor and Moss chose to proceed. They adjusted quickly. Kreiper's routines were observed. His movements between headquarters and residence were predictable. His staff relied on routine rather than caution. German command assumed that high-ranking officers were untouchable on Crete. That assumption became the operation's opening. Cretan resistant fighters played a decisive role. They provided safe houses, scouts, and guides. They also carried the risk. German reprisals against civilians were standard practice. Everyone involved understood the cost if the mission failed or even if it succeeded. Some scholars later questioned whether the British fully accounted for this. Others argued the resistance insisted on the operation, seeing it as a statement of defiance. Logistics were minimal by design. There would be no heavy weapons or explosives. Disguises alone would do the work. German military police uniforms were obtained. A roadblock scenario was rehearsed repeatedly. Timing mattered. The car had to be stopped cleanly, the driver neutralized quietly, and Kruiper controlled before he could shout. There would be no extraction plan until after the kidnapping. First, they had to disappear into the mountains. Only then would Cairo be contacted. It was a gamble built on confidence, familiarity, and speed. By mid-April 1944, the decision was final. The men were in position. The route was mapped. The general's habits were known. The plan depended on deception lasting only seconds, but those seconds would decide everything. The operation began on the evening of April 26, 1944, outside Heraklion. It was the moment Lee Firmer and Moss had been waiting for. Disguised in German Feldgendarmerie uniforms, complete with white gorgets and correct insignia, the two officers took position at a narrow stretch of road. Their German was fluent and their posture precise. To any passing driver, they looked routine. Shortly after 9:30 p.m., Kruiper approached in his official staff car driven by his chauffeur. As expected, the car slowed and the driver saluted, while Kruiper sat in the back. What happened next took seconds. Moss stepped forward, opened the driver's door and struck the chauffeur, pulling him out of the seat. Lee Firmer reached the rear door and seized Kruiper before he could react. The general attempted to resist but was quickly subdued. No shots were fired. The uniforms did their work. Any distant observer would have seen nothing unusual, just police handling an officer's vehicle. Kruiper was forced into the back seat. Moss took the wheel. Lee Firmer sat beside the general, a pistol pressed discreetly into his ribs. The car drove on, passing 22 German checkpoints without challenge. This phase of the operation was the most dangerous. If any patrol had looked too closely, the mission would have ended instantly. Some historians later questioned whether the number of checkpoints passed was exaggerated. German records confirm at least several controlled posts were crossed using Kruiper's authority and car. After clearing the city outskirts, the team abandoned the vehicle. The chauffeur was left bound but alive, ensuring discovery would be delayed rather than immediate. The general's cap and documents were removed. A note was left inside the car signed by British officers stating Kruiper had been taken by Allied forces, not Cretan civilians. This was intended to reduce reprisals, though its effectiveness remains debated. Once on foot, the tone shifted. Speed gave way to endurance. The kidnappers moved inland toward the mountains, following pre-arranged routes known only to local guides. Kruiper was informed of his situation. He was now a prisoner of war. Resistance, he was told, would only worsen his chances. By dawn on April 27, 1944, the kidnapping had become a full-scale crisis. German commands on Crete launched immediate countermeasures. Roads were sealed, villages were searched. Orders went out to recover Kruiper at any cost. The kidnappers were already climbing. Their route led south away from Heraklion into the White Mountains. Progress was slow. Kruiper was forced to walk, often at night, over narrow paths used for centuries by shepherds and smugglers. During the day, the group hid in caves or remote farm buildings. Local villagers made survival possible. Food appeared quietly, fresh guides rotated in and out, and wounded feet were treated without complaint. Each helper understood the risk. German doctrine on Crete linked resistance activity to collective punishment. German search operations tightened. At times, patrols passed within meters of hiding places. Once a unit camped directly below a cave sheltering the group. Kruiper, according to a later account, remained calm. He spoke occasionally with Lee Firmer. At one point, while resting on a mountain ridge, the two men reportedly recited lines from Horace in Latin, an episode that later became famous. The escape took nearly 3 weeks. Terrain slowed pursuit. German units were trained for roads and towns, not highland movement. Radio coordination faltered. The resistance understood the landscape instinctively. This balance proved decisive. By May 13, 1944, the group reached the southern coast near Rodas. Contact had been made with British command. A motor launch approached under cover of darkness. On May 14th, Kruiper was transferred abroad and taken to Egypt, ending the operation. For the SOE, the mission was declared a success. No territory was gained, no units destroyed, but But a German general had been taken from under occupation command. The message was unmistakable. The reprisals that followed were severe. Villages such as Anogea were razed to the ground in the months after the kidnapping. Kripal was later moved to Canada, where he remained a prisoner of war until 1947. He was never tried for war crimes. Unlike his predecessor, he returned quietly back to civilian life in West Germany. In 1972, he met his former captors once more on Greek television, a strange reunion between men who had shared Horace on a mountainside nearly 3 decades earlier. Operation Kripal remains controversial. For Allied planners, it was a psychological victory. For Crete, the cost was paid in blood. But the raid became legend, not for what it destroyed, but for what it proved. Nazi authority could be broken. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more History Inside, and we'll see you in the next one.